Thanks a lot, Felix, for accepting to take the talk. And for everyone who is joining in just now, the talk is about low resource NLP, I mean, locally spoken languages. And there are very few companies operating in this space. And I'm very glad that Felix and team have been working, doing great work in this space. And Felix is here to share knowledge about low resource NLP. And Felix is the CEO of Neuralspace.ai. And for those who are new here, just a quick introduction about me. I'm Ramsri, currently based out of Hyderabad, India. I run LearnNLP.academy, where I teach NLP courses. And also I run two NLP SaaS, Question.ai and Supermeme.ai. Both of them are heavily focused on NLP and delivering real world use cases. That's about me in short, but I won't take much of your time and we'll get started right away. Handing it over to you, Felix. You should be able to share the screen now.
Wonderful. So yeah, cool. So we are Neurospace. We have been founded in 2019, and our somewhat funny but really true slogan is "Click, Train, Chill," because we do a lot of no-code and there's a lot of outdoor NLP or outdoor MLOps where you really can just click and then wait a little bit until the model is trained or the model is deployed. What I give you here is about an overview. So we are about more than 20 employees now, have in total received more than $3 million in investment, have about 200 happy customers who have signed up to our platform, and also work now with a couple of enterprise customers who do different things with us, all with a focus on NLP in low resource languages, right? So I will later on go in more details what the enterprise customers actually do with us, but they always have a very strong interest in developing language technology that can be on a speech level, that can be on a text level for locally spoken languages. And there's a lot what we do in India. We have, for example, 12 locally spoken Indian languages, but we also have now 7 Arabic dialects. We have a couple of languages in Africa, in Southeast Asia, and so on. So it's always that focus, how do I get accurate NLP models for those locally spoken languages? And what we have developed is what we call the Neurospace Platform. So there are lots of different, actually separate services or separate technologies that are all from ASR, so automatic speech recognition, to now under development at the moment, a TTS, a text-to-speech model. We have a translation, we have an intent, entity, sentiment model, and then also transliteration, augmentation, and a couple more. So all of these different services are available on our platform, and you as a user, you can really get in and use them in whatever combination you want. AutoNLP is what we call the automatic training capabilities of our models. So whenever you work with Neuralspace, you actually define some data set initially. You can obviously upload that when you already have something available. We have a bunch of data sets that are directly on our platform, so you can import them, or you can even use our what we call the data studio to create your own data set. But then after that, it's really a click. You click on train with AutoNLP and the model trains. Takes normally a couple of minutes. When it's a large data, that's a few hours. And then there is really, lots of you know that, lots of you are quite technical, and I really like that there is a transformer-based model in the backend that has been developed by ourselves. We have actually trained a lot of base models even by ourselves, which is obviously a huge computational effort, but also like having that data, really you can play a lot when you actually train a base model by yourself, right? There may be some what we have seen a lot in India, for example, code mixed data, right? So people write half in English, half in Hindi, for example, and then we actually train the base model even on such data. We have obviously looked a lot into multilingual training data sets. So how do actually our models perform on a downstream task? Let's say on anti-recognition, when we have the base model trained across 100 languages, how does that work? What we have learned, and that's hopefully something what you guys will also use in the future, is that we have used smaller language groups to train base models. Obviously, training base models is a huge task and it is heavy on computation. But if you have the possibility, we have had a lot of success in training base models in a multilingual fashion, but on a smaller subgroup of languages. So for India, for example, you could take all the southern Indian languages, right? Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada. In Europe, you can maybe take Spanish, French, Portuguese, Italian, and so on, right? So you have a lot of data available because you group different languages together. However, it's still multilingual, and you actually get a much better performance when compared to when you do a monolingual model but have smaller amount of data available. So that was kind of a key learning for us. In Africa, obviously, you can do the same. You can group different languages together that are somewhat related. So we've used that a lot. I have trained base models and then enabled on top of that so each user has their own what we call a head model. So the head model is very often like auto transform, right? The last few layers that you can then actually fine tune on your unique use case. And this is all done automatically with our auto NLP. And then you have, in the end, really a model trained that's customized. It's not training forever because you only train the head model. And then you have that model and really performs very accurately for lots of different downstream tasks. Once that is done, then we actually come to the auto ML ops, right? Because some of you in the audience are maybe researchers, but some of them are maybe actually also practitioners who want then to deploy these models in a real world setting. So what we did with auto ML ops is really put up lots of engineering efforts, and there's obviously distilling the model. There is some binarization, but there's a lot more that we have also internally developed to bring down the size of these large language models, deploy them at a very cost-efficient way. And then when your model is deployed, it normally also takes a couple of seconds. Then you have a unique API that you can call. We also have put lots of effort into our scalability, so you can also deploy multiple replicas, multiple copies of the model without them. So we have a lot of what we've seen is users speak very local languages. They even, here the second one is a mixed languages. If they speak only English or if they speak only French, it's very often not the cleanest English or not the cleanest French. So there's lots of slang. There are lots of terms which are somehow dynamically evolving, right? On social media, how the younger generation is calling a certain behavior is now very different to how it was 2 years ago. The language is evolving. People use these spoken languages. They use slangs. They mix languages. So it's all quite difficult actually to work with that. What we've also seen, which is a quite interesting observation, is customers, especially in Europe, are now super concerned about data privacy. So this is something what came first and foremost through GDPR, but then also like other countries also said, okay, we need to establish some data privacy laws or regulations. And last is that we have seen what I mentioned before, when you have these 300, 500 gigabyte models, it's quite expensive to actually scale them or even deploy them. So we have really focused mainly at Neuralspace on those 4 problem statements and then try to find really solutions to those. And the first one is obviously as many languages as we can. Where we are particularly strong at the moment are Indian languages and Arabic dialect. So 12 Indian languages we have. Also, what is very often used in India, quite code mixed. So let's say Gujarati plus English, Tamil plus English, and we have also done all these code mixed models for the Indian languages. And then Arabic dialects, there are also very wide range of dialects from all the way from in the West, from Morocco and Tunisia. I think we have at least 2 people from Tunisia, which is a very different dialect to the one that is spoken in Egypt, in the UAE, in Lebanon, and so on. So we have defined, or we have actually trained specific models for those different dialects. Again, you're mixing languages apart, and then we have made this more an engineering effort, but we have tried to establish everything in a containerized way that it can be deployed in private clouds or on-premise. This was just because of these data privacy concerns that we have seen a lot in the European market, especially. And lastly, we have, as I said already previously, that automatic scaling with auto ML ops. Again, any questions? Feel free to interrupt. I will skip that and I will actually go directly to the Neuralspace platform. So Neuralspace platform is really that one thing where you can have all of the different services that I list here on the right-hand side And we go here through from creating the data set to training it to deploying it. And then afterwards, when it's even live, we have incorporated something which we call Feedback Studio. The models that we have on Neuralspace are always internally saved. So there's at the moment no possibility to export them, but you can just get in the end actually an API that you can use to serve these models or to call the models. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yep. Okay, sorry for that. Okay, so then let's go back here to the video. Yeah, here you create a project, and then you really go into the next step where you create a data set. We have a data studio where you can create all of the data, and there you can also upload or import. So there's really a field where you can individually write in text, but there's also, as I said, an upload feature where you have a predefined data set that you have used, for example, in Google Dialogflow or Azure Luis or AWS Lex that you want to import to a Neuralspace, and then you can directly click on the upload functionality. What we see here in import are just pre-uploaded data sets that are already on Neuralspace, goes from Amazon massive data set to many, many others that we just came across that are partly open source. Some of them we have worked on with our data providers to make available on Neuralspace. What you see here is a functionality where you actually can type in text, so you can actually create data also in our data studio itself. We also have here nicely an annotation functionality, so you can actually annotate entities within the language understanding data studio. Once that is done, you do it for a couple of examples. You can actually train. And as I said previously, it's a simple one-click training where you simply go on in the top here, train without the NLP, and then it's done. And you have then really the possibility to select all the multiple training jobs if you want to have multiple models being trained in parallel, but to simply train it and then you wait for it a little bit, and then it's actually just here preparing the pipeline. Training will normally take a minute or two when the data set is relatively small, but then you have it saved and then it's ready for you to deploy. So deploying is at outer MLOps, which I mentioned previously. Again, just a click, deploy with outer MLOps, and then it's ready. And you always have in the right bottom a couple of performance matrices, and then you can actually test the model. So you can just have a little bit of an evaluation. You can just type in something, then click on parse text. And when you click on that parse text, it actually gives you the output, which is showing you here now. So there's an order query for that certain extent, and poha is even recognized as an Indian, as a food item. And that's basically it. So when you have done that, there's really in the end also additionally a feedback studio where every data point or every example that has been processed by the model is saved in the feedback studio, and you can go back and annotate it again, add it back to your training set, and just train again, because we have the model versioning where everyone can actually just keep retraining the models and get better results over time. Yes, so let me quickly then go to the next slide. I want to focus a little bit on the languages that we cover. So as I said before, at the moment it's India and the Middle East quite strong as our focus, but we also have lots of other languages. So in India, we focus those from Bengali, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, to all the code mix, right? The code mix is always Bengali, English, people have been calling it Benglish, Hinglish, all of that you probably know. And there are many more. So when we share the slide later, you can really click through it and see what other languages we have. In the MENA, so Middle East and Northern Africa, we have different Arabic dialects. At the moment, Egyptian, a Gulf Arabic, and a couple more. Then we have in Africa Swahili, there's a coastal Swahili, and also a mix between those, and Yoruba, which is spoken in Nigeria, is also quite strong focus at the moment. Two of the enterprise customers that I want to mention that we have had that I mentioned in the very beginning are one conversational AI company that's called Abbott. It's based out of Sweden. They use us primarily for the Scandinavian languages, so for Swedish, Norwegian, Icelandic, Finnish, and Danish. but they also moved on to other European languages. For them, the really biggest focus was privacy. So we did a private cloud installation for them, and they really have full ownership. They have worked before with a big tech solution and just did not have that privacy which they have now with Neuralspace, plus giving very, very good results for all of these Scandinavian languages. And then we work with another larger company called Eden.ai. They are a machine learning marketplace, so people go in and compare how is AWS Flex, comparing with Microsoft Azure Luis, maybe comparing with Neurospace, and then choosing the best possibility for their specific purpose. And that's really all about like the one-stop NLP solution, because we offer speech to text through them, we offer anti-recognition through them, and lots of others. Yes, and quickly on the pricing, maybe not that relevant, but we have a kind of pay-as-you-go method, so you pay per message or per minute of speech. Everyone who sign up gets $200 at the moment of free credits. That's more or less enough to build a proper use case and build a proper POC for you. Yeah, that's kind of all. We went into some of the details that are a bit more technical. I spoke a little bit about how we actually do transformers and a bit of distilling and quantization, all of that. But I'm more than happy to go more into these details if people are interested. But also on the other hand, right, like kind of what are people interested, what they can build with Neuralspace. I'm also more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, Felix, I think there's one question by Prasad. How to build a library like Nltk in local languages? Yeah,
very good question, Prasad. If you want to build an entire library, it's a huge effort. I would love to support you as much as you can, but don't underestimate it. It would be a huge effort because you basically need tons of different models that need to be permanently hosted, and you need to have some kind of API keys where you can call them. You may find kind of it really depends what you want to build, right? But it may be actually more helpful for kind of smaller projects when you actually like combine. You start a mini package, let's call it a mini package that you write for Python or want to build in Python, and then you combine different other libraries that you find extremely helpful, right? So Nltk could be some of them. Maybe some functionalities of Nltk you will directly have. Maybe you have kind of a wrapper function around that. Then maybe you take something that comes from let's say NVIDIA, which has really a great collection of open source projects as well, or open source libraries. And then you maybe have a smaller package that is really fitting your specific use case very accurately. And then you expand from that, right? And say, okay, that's kind of my project philosophy. I have a certain language that I want to, or a certain type, how you write your APIs, and you just want to have a package that combines different other libraries.
Correct. So first of all, how do you collect data? Why I am asking this question is that, for example, let's say locally spoken languages, for example, I speak Telugu at home. If you hear to the news channels and read the paper, whatever is documented online, that's more formal, and what we speak is more informal. And so one question is, how do you tackle this problem? Secondly, how do you collect data? Because a lot of it is not available online. How do you go and source and collect data?
So what we have been doing, and that is somewhat like luckily possible for us as a company, but for individual developers maybe not, we actually worked with data acquisition companies. Where they really had, some of them have actually really nice approaches that they have somehow like kind of a gaming platform, and people actually then collect like data as a side product, or they collect data as a side product. But you get that data where people, how people are interacting with each other, right? So say it's not like formal, it's not written for being read by thousands of people. It's really like one-to-one conversations where data is collected. So we did work a little bit with data acquisition companies, which is obviously not a cheap effort. You probably know that, Ramshree, and probably lots of other people know that as well. We have done a bit like with kind of academic collaborations. We have that research project we then actually would like to see how that research would evolve, how it would be used in a business context or for business, and then they have worked with us as Neurospace. And there was always a bit of like data provision that is anyways an open source very often, but we also have it, and we have been able to train our models quite early with that data. It also gave us an advantage. We have always been thinking of like kicking off our own data acquisition efforts, which would be amazing, because we could, like for India, we could probably travel to every state of India and really like sit with people and collect data. But yeah, at the moment it's more kind of actually working with partners who have kind of the process in place. But yeah, it's like one thing is collecting data. The second is kind of tackling the problem from the different side, right? Is build models that are very data efficient. And that's what we also hugely focus on in Neurospace. So don't have your whatever 50 terabyte, not 50 terabyte, but like don't have your 2 terabyte of data that you need to have an acceptable model performance. Try to get your model to a way that it actually performs on 10 gigabyte, right? So this kind of tackling the problem from both ends we try to do.
Got it. So I think to summarize, you work with data acquisition companies. So
Yep.
I have some experience with localization companies. So
Yep.
I assume localization also falls into that category. And beyond that, companies who approach you, the enterprises have data themselves. That's also a part.
Very often.
Okay, that's
Exactly.
to summarize. And I think coming to the second question, which is follow up on this. How much data do you need? For example, if you're doing intent classification, or if you're
Yep.
doing some text generation tasks in these languages, if you're talking about pairs of data, let's say translation or paraphrasing, or if you're talking about annotated for classification, how many pairs do you need, etc.?
Yeah. So let's start with intent classification, where we do like short text classification. So what came through transformers, and probably most people here on the call know that, is that there's like so much knowledge that can be leveraged in an intent classification task that is actually inherent, that is actually unlabeled data that is coming trained by the transformer, right? So you have a lot of knowledge that is somehow there, but like you can't really directly use it, except maybe for a language generation, but not for kind of an intent classification task, because you have only trained your transformers on unlabeled data. So what is, however, still, and that's why I mentioned that, what is still very, very crucial is that there is some information, some knowledge in these models already. So now it's a task to very efficiently leverage that knowledge that is in the transformers, but then make it a supervised task. So that's what we do with our head models, right? Where we train the last couple of layers of the transformer and fine tune them and make them accessible to each user individually. So what is actually required, and that's the absolute bare minimum, but it does actually perform somewhat decent in some use cases, is that you then only give about 10 examples per intent. So per class, you give 10 examples, and you can have whatever, like 5-6 classes maybe to start with. And obviously the more classes you have, the more examples per class you want to have. But we have seen now a couple of use cases where really you give 10 examples and it did a decent job. And what we have been kind of encouraging people who use Neuralspace is say, really, when you don't have a massive data set available, start with 10, start maybe with 15 per intent, then go live, go with a very, very minimalistic use case live. And because then you can collect data on the fly, right? Then your users will use the model. You have everything, and Neurospace, you have it in the feedback studio. When you use something else, you have it somewhere saved, most likely as well, right? So you go then into that data and then say, okay, how have people, or what have been people trying to do with my model? Let's now annotate that data, put it back into the training set, retrain, and then I have actually a model where I know it's actually fulfilling the customer's needs, right? Or the user's needs. It's not that I need to take like some really strong assumptions in the beginning how my model will be used. I can actually then refine it with real user input. And this maybe a little bit of a shift of how people have been doing things. But I really say, okay, like don't assume your model is perfect from day one, but then focus on the retraining. And then you collect data and then it gets more accurate and you add more intents, you add more capabilities and so on. Right? That's only for intent. For translation, obviously, you don't want to have a totally messed up translation in the first place because it's then literally useless, right? It really depends on the language pair. It depends on so many different factors, but translation obviously needs a lot more data than these 10 examples.
Got it. And on a high level, you have
Yep.
classification, generation, right?
Yep.
And what
Yep.
are the go-to models, base models that you use? Are they multilingual models usually?
Yep. They are very often a multilingual model that is trained on a smaller subset of languages. So, but maybe you have seen Bloom that recently came out by Hugging Face and the big science group. I think they have taken 102, 105 languages or so. I can't remember exactly, and have really just trained an entire model in all of these languages. I actually haven't evaluated Bloom yet, but probably performs really good, right? So, what we have been doing, we wanted to then, okay, what do I do with Bloom? Do I put it directly into production? It might maybe not work, except I'm Facebook, who has whatever millions of cash left, but for sure not for Neuralspace. So what we focus on, okay, how do I get such a model down in size, and then also get still accurate results for lots of language. So we focused on smaller groups of languages than training multilingual models for, let's say, only Indian languages, only South Indian languages, only Western European languages, only African languages. Kind of that smaller multilingual models we did.
Got it. Great. I think Varshal from Dubverse has his hand raised. Please go ahead, Varshal.
Hey, Ramshri. Hey, Felix. I have just Karan with me. We were just listening to the conversation. Pretty insightful. So I think one of the things, I'll give some context about Dubbers, right? Like we are dealing with in the thick of translations, and these are primarily Indian languages, where essentially what we do is we have create a product where anybody can convert their videos from English to Hindi, Tamil, Telugu, etc.
Nice.
So see, while we are trying to do that, it's an open product, and right now we are in beta, closed beta. But then the use cases that we see is from fitness domain to finance domain to medical domain. So while we are doing the translation, I'm just curious, how do you solve for the flavor around the translation, the domain around the translation? Is it something that you actively look at? That's part A of my question, and I'll cover the part B. But yeah, I hope you're I'll cover that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Very good question, Bob. And it's an open problem. Many people have. How we have approached it so far is that we always give the possibility of that train without NLP at Neuralspace, right? So it's a certain level of customization, and that even at the moment it's not yet integrated, but we even work on a translation customization. So what does it mean? That you give some of the examples, let's say in a fitness domain, where you really say, okay, I have here some certain keywords, some certain terms that are very, very specific to my fitness domain. I have maybe some sentences, how people express that they should work out harder or should whatever, right? That are then translated by humans. So if you can get that human translation, if you have maybe a partner who does provide some data that for you, brilliant. If not, obviously there are some partners that we have as well. But then you customize these models for that specific use case. So with translations especially, but also it goes also with speech to text, I'm not seeing in the near future, let's say 3 to 5 years, a one-size-fits-all approach. I don't think that Google Translate will ever get that well that they can do anything from legal to fitness to marketing material in a perfect manner. I just don't believe it, right? So I think I more follow the approach of specific models for a specific use case. And that goes for translation. You said you do video translation, localization, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah, video dubbing, video localization. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so there is then also the speech to text, right? Because there will also be some terms when people are speaking, whatever personal trainer, who then are very specific again to the domain. And you also want to transcribe them accurately.
Got it. Got it. So I think the other question that I had is around capturing semantics, right? Because
Yep.
since all of this is very contextual, then how do you very well capture the semantics? I mean, even look at ASR or speech to text. They are able to
Yep.
give a confidence score, right?
Yep.
Because essentially that's part of discriminative AI. So you have a ground truth basis which you can test it. But when we're dealing with generative AI, right? Like especially translation, then how do you? Is there some way to sort of quantify that whatever level of output the system is giving, it's this much accurate or this close to X semantics, something around
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Not directly, but there is one other company that I know that do very interesting work, and I did now forget the name, but say, and maybe you know them already. They give a risk score to a translation. So it's not an accuracy level, as they're called model front. Now the name comes back. They're called model front, as a really model like a machine learning model, and then front front. I think it's .com or .ai, and they give that risk score on top of a translation. And you may want to check what language translations they cover, but that could be maybe a solution you could look at.
Interesting. I think I'll connect with you separately on this because
Totally.
and look at how Neuralspace can help our solve our use case.
Yeah.
So yeah, but this is interesting. Thanks for organizing this,
Super.
Ramji. Thank you, Felix.
While you
Thank
are
you.
there, I actually have a question for you, Varshul. And so I have this question. You need to deal with constraint translation, right? What I mean by that is you say a sentence in English in 2 seconds. You translate that into, let's say, Telugu or Hindi. It will be uttered in 2.5 seconds or sometimes less, right? So since you're translating and dubbing videos, it's not just about translating, but rather doing constraint translation. How are you shortening or elongating the translated sentence?
That's interesting. That's something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So basically, the way we look at it is that one way to solve this is translation, right? Where essentially you have a 4-second sentence in English and a 6-second sentence in Hindi. Versus we started looking at this entire translation problem as a transcreation problem, where we say that we are not necessarily trying to translate word by word or sentence by sentence, but essentially trying to describe what's happening in the scene. And when we talk about content, right, Ramshri, in our case, there is a lot of type of content. Sometimes we also elongate and compress the video, wherever there's not a face, it's like a screencast, like a how-to video. There we are fine to sort of elongate the video from 4 to 6 seconds, make it 50% fast, 50% slower. So that's we do a lot of these logics, custom defined logics depending on the content type. So that's what we do. I mean, we have not been able to perfect it right now, but that's something that we are looking at. Yeah.
Got it. Great. I think for podcasts, it's perfect in the sense that a 10-minute podcast could go on to 15 minutes and nothing happens, right? Whereas when it comes to video, you need to operate under this constraint. And as you mentioned, maybe you're playing around with SSML to elongate and shorten, etc. But it's an interesting problem.
Thanks, Ramji. Thanks for organizing this.
I think we have one question from Ram, which is text to speech available?
You need 2 more weeks of patience, Ram. We are working on it. It's in staging already. I was trying it out this morning. It does work quite well, but we need a bit more time to make it available on our platform.
Got it. And Yasmin asks, what are the most requested NLP tasks and languages on the platform by users?
Yeah, very good question. There is a lot of interest in speech. So we have at the moment 24 languages live for speech to text. I mean, not for text to speech, for speech to text. These 24 languages are mostly actually European languages, but we also have Hindi and Oriya, just because my co-founder comes from Bhubaneswar, so he really wanted to have Oriya as one of the first languages. But for Hindi, we got, for example, extremely good feedback. And at the moment, we have for Hindi at least just a general model, so there's not yet customization, but we want to have something which is called vocab adaptation or vocabulary adaptation. So you really have then a specialized, again, similar to what we have done previously with train without NLP, always that customization possibility on top of the pre-trained models.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's the 24 languages. We are expanding a lot at the moment. So we'll have nearly 50, I think, over the next 2 to 3 months.
Got it. Let me ask a commercial VC type of question. So when there is Amazon and Google doing speech to text and other things, how do you differentiate yourself? Is it with better data? Yeah.
There is, better data. I don't know, right? I really don't know what Amazon has data. They probably have a lot more than we have. What we have done just recently, comparison with the service called Google Dialogflow. So they are really chatbot companies, use them in and out, right? And we have done just a comparison for Indian languages. And we actually found, we did intent classification accuracy, and we found a 10 to 15% higher accuracy for almost all the languages. So we realized, okay, so their Dialogflow offers these languages, but then the underlying model must be not really like set great, right? Or it is still good. It gives you whatever 75, but then with Neuralspace, how we build it, it gives you something like 85 or maybe even 90% for the training sets that we have given to it. And yeah, so there is some just like accuracy performance that increases. What we have also seen a lot in chatbots, especially when people either use code mixed language, right? So they write in English, for example, in the Arabic speaking world, we have something called Arabisi. So they actually speak Arabic, but use the English alphabet. Dialogflow and other commercial solutions normally don't perform that well on them. And then what is especially difficult is when people switch between different languages. So really start a sentence in German, then suddenly there's something which whoever the person finds more familiar speaking English with, they then type in English, then they end the conversation again in German. And that works all nicely with Neuralspace, but we have seen the other big tech solutions really like failing in that context, or want to start the conversation again in a new language and all of that. So we try to kind of focus on those pain points.
Got it. Great. I think we have Saurya. Go ahead, Saurya.
Yeah, thanks, Felix and Ram. Sorry, I joined a bit late because I was up last night running an iteration Kaldi and things got bad. So yeah, so I wanted to ask, speech to text is great in local languages. Maybe this might have been covered earlier, but I'm sorry about that. What about having this chatbot or mobile assistant like Siri or Alexa, that kind of with more, I guess, intelligence, you could say, or apart from just the speech to text, can we utilize the progress in the state of that with respect to a conversational AI in the other languages like English, Mandarin? Can we use speech to text with the existing state of the art to build great models for the other local languages?
So you would do, I just need to repeat if I understand that correctly. You want to like have a speech to text model, and then afterwards you would like to have some kind of conversation AI, which would maybe be simply an NLU model.
Yeah. Right. So I was my specific question is, can we use the NLU or conversational AI that are there for English and other languages? Can we use that to build it for local languages?
Yeah. Definitely, there are multiple approaches that people have been taking, or I've seen at least. There may be a few more. So one is kind of relying on live translations, right? So whenever there's an input coming in, you can have a speech to text model, for example, in, let's say, I don't know, Afrikaans, right, which is spoken in Southern Africa in a couple of countries. So you can have a speech to text model in that language, then you have the transcription, which is text in Afrikaans, and then you do a translation and do automatic translation and feed it into your English NLU model, let's say, right? This would be kind of relying on live translations. And we have seen somewhat mediocre success with that, because sometimes really you want to detect some nuances of the language which only are really like available in that local language. And again, there is translation. We know that, right? It's not perfect. It can be very, very specific for certain use cases. On the other hand, what you could do is actually translating the training set that you took to train the NLU model. And then so there would be something what would be fairly easy to do at Neuralspace when you have multiple NLU models in parallel for a specific language or maybe for a subset of languages. And then, so how do you know in which NLU model your data needs to go, right? You just have on top of that kind of an entry, a gate, you can call it a language detection model. So you do a language detection, first of all, find out, okay, that's Afrikaans, let's go into the Afrikaans NLU model and let my data be processed by the Afrikaans NLU model. And then from there on, it's then, right? So you never rely actually on that English, and you can actually work in the local language. And we found that approach in a couple of use cases. It's again different, is that you have then actually higher accuracy, because when you train a native NLU model in, let's say, Afrikaans, it can actually generalize better than when you translate Afrikaans to English and then put everything into English, because sometimes it's just very messed up and it just doesn't even make sense once the translation is done.
Yeah, great.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, thanks, Felix. So I have one more follow-up question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, how open is Neuralspace with collaborating with early stage startups who are working in the, I guess, local language domain, or they might have used for this NLP or speech in this local.
Very open.
language.
So yeah.
Okay.
Let's connect offline. We are generally
sure.
very open to that. We are still a startup by ourselves, right? And if we can somehow support, totally happy to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Felix. Yeah.
Felix, I have one question. So right now, let's say if it's a classification, then let's say you have 100 classes, then you get a score for every class, right? So whatever prediction you do, then you say that 90% prediction score is for class A or something like that, and you give similar. But when it comes to text generation, where there are multiple tokens, let's say the output is, let's say, Elon Musk, then when it's tokenized, etc., it's 4 or 5 tokens or 2 tokens or something, right? For a multi-token output, how do you get a score? And is it multiplication, or what kind of, how do you deal with that?
Super good question, Ramsey, and I wish I had an answer for that, which would just be, I think it's a very open research question, right? And we also really haven't found internally a perfect solution to that. I hope that somehow, like, the NLP community emerges to one way how to do that properly, and then like everyone agrees on, right? Because that's again then kind of a benchmark metric at least. But yeah, it's sadly a bit early.
No worries. Because I encountered that sometimes when building question.ai, I could just think of ways, you accumulate the BREEAM such score across the tokens when you're doing beam decoding, right? Things like that. But I could never really find a perfect thing. That's one. And
I will share some research papers with you later, Ramsey. I think that people looked into that.
Awesome.
And maybe some inspiration.
Sure, sounds good. Second thing is little more, I would say, probing, in the sense that for me personally, the reason why I did not work heavily on local languages, to be very honest, is the commercialization aspect around it, and how much money is there when I invent something new or techniques like that. For the same reason, I've been dealing with mostly, shamelessly speaking, only English predominantly, because of the market size and things like that. And now coming back to what Neuralspace is doing, first of all, how did you approach that part of the effort versus ROI kind of thing, both on a personal front, secondly, on a commercial front, answering to VCs?
Yeah. So very good question, Ramsey, and we actually get that asked quite often. So especially by investors, that's kind of the number one question, right? I 100% agree that there is still, and there will in the foreseeable future be, the English-speaking markets one that is most commercially viable, right? There's no secret around that. However, I think, and Ramsey, you probably know that a lot better than I actually, like people who have now, so who live in India in let's say in villages even, right? Or you call them tier 2 and tier 3 cities, or even villages. Like they have smartphones now, right? Very often they do have, and they're maybe first-time smartphone users, and they're still somewhat unfamiliar. But they do have smartphones now, and they will participate in our online world already, right? That's accessible to the English-speaking population. And I actually look very much enjoy looking at one statistic, which is called, or actually two, which are smartphone penetration in a country and internet penetration, or like mobile network penetration, right? So, and how that has been progressing in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kenya, Nigeria over the last 5 years is just like unbelievable, right? So I don't know, 5 years or maybe now 7 years ago or 8 years ago, there were like 60%, maybe 70% having actually access to mobile phones and mobile network. So internet on the go. But that's like at 95% now for all of these countries, right? So like wherever you are in the country, you most likely have a mobile network, mobile internet, which is actually really, really fast for lots of those. So, and we know, right, there's English-speaking people, we know that actually makes your life more convenient. You have access to so much information, you can shop for things when you need them on the fly, and all of these things. So I think it's just a matter of time until people want to participate in that world, or do more than what they do right now. And so it's a question of making it possible for them, and that's why we build it, right? So I think obviously people also want to learn English because of many other reasons. I think they have more educational, they have more career prospects with knowing English. But there will be lots of people who want to participate in the online world who cannot speak English, or in other countries French. So I think it's maybe still a bit early, but like it's a matter of time, and I think people want to also like have just the possibilities with all the technology to shop online, to get online advice on a certain disease and so on, right? Really makes their life much better.
Got it. Great. We have one question from Pratik. Any advice for someone who wants to build a chatbot startup? And just adding some flavor to it.
Yeah.
I'm always in a 50-50 dilemma that, chatbot might be saturated. There might be some innovation, but there is some level of saturation. So how do you approach this?
Yeah. It's true. There are lots of chatbot startups popping up, and I think actually the adoption was a lot. So the adoption by people, right? Maybe whatever. Probably most of us can remember using a chatbot sometime like 4 or 5 years ago. Most of the time didn't really detect what I want. It was really hard to handle. I never got through to actual human who can help me. So it was quite tough. I think they have matured a lot in technology and user friendliness. And I think they also, like the pandemic, kind of when we're all sitting at home, kind of forced us to use that technology a bit more. So starting a company in general is like a very exciting journey, but also very difficult. And Ramsri, you know that, maybe some other people, Hatem, I know a little bit, who has also his own company. So it can be also very, very painful. But it is overall very exciting. How you would start specifically startup that develops chatbots, I would probably focus on one specific niche, right? So Pratik, I just assume from your name that you're from India. There are now massive companies, right? Gupshup does chatbots, is massive. Haptik is massive. Yellow AI has lots of employees in India. They're all massive companies, and just coming into the market, into that field and saying, hey, I'm having chatbots, it will be hard that companies actually start believing you. So I would maybe say, okay, let me do a chatbot for, I don't know, for veterinaries, so, or for farmers or something, right? Which maybe then even has additionally voice. Okay, what do I need to do with farmers? I need to be super good in local languages plus local dialects. I need to be specialized on that vocabulary. They will speak about certain parts of a buffalo, of a cow, that maybe my generic model that Haptik can provide is not able to do. So I would really focus on one niche and would really try to adopt the models that you do on the chatbot or even on the voice bot is really like super, super specialized and focused on that one use case. And then you very often see, okay, one veterinary is adapting it. Okay, there will be word of mouth. He will speak to the veterinary in the next town. Hey, there is a super good help that the chatbot can give me. And then you will have word of mouth and people will adapt it. And then when you really think, okay, I have now covered whatever 80% of Indian veterinaries, which are again probably more than 100 million people. No, not 100, but more than 1 million people. Then you already have a massive market, right? But then when you really have saturated that, fully exploited that, then you can expand. You can say, okay, now let's go from veterinary into human medicine. Maybe it's not that different, right? And so, yeah, that's how I will kind of niche by niche I would approach, but maybe starting with one and really trying to solve their problems as good as you can.
Got it. Great. And in what you do, how much percentage is speech and how much is text? And what's your emphasis going forward?
We do at the moment, I would say we do still, I actually don't know the exact percentage, but more or less we do at the moment process, just like what users process in our platform, right? Is I would say around 60 to 70% text at the moment and 30 to 40% speech. I see speech being a lot more used. Very often you don't have them separated, right? So what is someone doing with a transcribed video, for example? Okay, they can use them for automatic subtitles, but very often they want to do on top of that, right? They want to do sentiment analysis, which is again being done on text. So you very often have actually text being then kind of in parallel increasing with speech demand. But when I look only at the models who only process speech or only text, then I actually see speech is a lot more needed, a lot more in demand, and has a kind of a steeper up slope, right, in how many process or how many requests we process per week or per month.
Got it. Okay.
There's actually one thing, Ramshi, which I maybe want to share, which is maybe even actually fuel that adaptive acceleration. So we work at the moment on what I call like code mixed speech to text models, and that has been something what I have not seen that much yet. But basically, you can do English then in speech to text, right? So people speak English, and then we actually transcribe it with the English characters, so with the Latin alphabet, and then we work on that further. Then you can do transliteration, right? When there's fully Hindi a sentence, then you can do transliteration. You do from the English alphabet back to the Hindi alphabet, for example. But like given then that we also have, for example, in our NLU models, all the capabilities to process code mixed language, which can be written in the English characters. Actually, these speech to text models that transcribe everything into the English characters, could be Hindi, could be Arabic or something, are then very useful. And we haven't seen that much yet. So some competitors have obviously Hindi, Telugu, Tamil speech to text models, but then they transcribe it into Tamil letters or Hindi letters. And then that sometimes can get really off when it's actually an English word in the middle, right? When you say, whatever, I want to change my tires, and tires is in English, everything else in Hindi. So people, that is something that I'm quite excited about, and I think these code mix speech to text models will be quite useful.
Got it. Saurya raised his hand. Please go ahead, Saurya.
Yeah. So I guess this question goes to both Felix and Ram. So when one is working on like a large scale system which involves NLP and speech, and one is just starting in an organization, and how vital it is to develop in-house, novel or in-house systems, and how much it is more advised to use existing implementations by other organizations or open source. And open source, it's great, you already have, but like what is the balance, like how much you want to have in-house IP and how much you want to do some partnership or licensing, that kind of stuff.
Amshri, do you want to answer first?
I think you are better suited, and I'll follow up on that.
Okay, so when the different approaches, obviously, so yeah, when you have when the problem that you want to solve at a large organization really involves only one single model. So when you really say, okay, I need to have whatever, let's say whatever sentiment analysis for my e-commerce offerings for very specific products and so on, you may actually say, okay, let's do it just by myself. I know I have all the data. I know my data will all be safe. I'm not needing to upload them on Google Cloud or wherever, right? That may be a good approach. When you have some more complex use cases, which involves multiple building blocks, multiple models maybe, then I would maybe actually build first the entire pipeline with existing from other companies. And then maybe, okay, when you then afterwards say, okay, like now I really know the entire pipeline. I have gotten some fairly good results with a licensed product or with multiple licensed products. Let's maybe even try in parallel to build it by ourselves. What you need to remember is always, most likely always, when you go with an external solution, you actually can build it much faster, right? So building everything in-house, you will need to think about, okay, deployability, what kind of latency do I expect when I build it internally, even with the sentiment analysis model, right? You say, okay, then I take that massive model, will give me whatever 1 second of latency. I can not really parallelize that. Okay, now I need to have something in place that I can have multiple models in parallel. There are other companies who have thought about exactly solving that problem, right? And then it would be just easier for you to have an initial feeling of, is that overall project required? Will it have a large audience? And then you can still think later on really building everything in-house. But like to get quicker to market, I think it's more advised to actually take some existing solutions.
Great. So adding on to Felix, similar thought process, which is you need to get to MVP fast and then iterate on it. And one of the things is that I always think about picking one core, and everything else that is not in the core of my business, I need to abstract it. For example, if you think about question.ai, from text generating these multiple choice questions, true or false, that's my core. Everything else, even deployment, is not core. I talked to almost 7 or 8 companies like Felix's for deploying the models, because I don't want to take even a minute to deploy it, containerize it, and things like that. So my thought process always is, whatever your core is, you need to define it. And in that core, you operate it to the depth, and mostly like develop a T-shaped skill where you have one core focus and everything is abstracted. And the other thing is that on the outset, you need to define what kind of company that you're building. So one thing is that there is a deep tech company. That means, but with the start itself, I'm building a deep tech company. And when I'm focused on that, the technology is my leverage. And other things is that you kind of solve the problems that you see in the world, right? For example, you want to buy groceries or from certain organic groceries and something doesn't exist, then it's more of a marketing and penetration and solution based system. Then in those cases, you don't need to work heavily on deep tech and invent something new, right? It's more about building a sustainable business and growth and marketing channel. So on the outset itself, when you're building a company, there's an approach to it, whether it's a deep tech or not. And again, within that, whether it's core or abstraction that you need to operate on. These are the 2 levels that I usually think of. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Felix and Ram. Yeah, thanks for your inputs.
Awesome. Thanks for joining in, Saurya. I think we are almost past time. So, and we answered most of the questions that we have. And any closing thoughts, Felix, just to wrap it up?
Really enjoyed. Super engaged audience and very good questions. Were extremely technical to more business, how to start a startup. No, really would be great to connect with everyone. Feel free to ask questions. Ramshri is probably much more knowledgeable actually than I am, but yeah, reach out to me if you have any questions.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Felix, for taking the time and patiently answering all our questions.